You have an idea. You want to tell it to the world, but you don't know where to start. That's where Anchor comes in. They have the tools for you to edit, produce, and record your idea right from your phone or computer. It's the easiest way to reach and grow your audience. They publish for you to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all major platforms. And to top it all off, they match you with advertisers so you can earn from your passion and your wonderful idea. So tell me, what are you waiting for? Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started and follow your dream.
So every time I see your Instagram feed,
I'm nervous.
but every time I see your Instagram feed, I see you dancing.
Absolutely.
And then I see you also saying down with the patriarchy. So
every time,
like pretty much every time I open it, I mean, I don't usually use social media. Like from time to time, like, you know, Felipe like tells me like, hey, go check the post and see if you like it. And I'm like, I already like it and I don't need to go. But I go and then I look at the stories and then I delete the app. But, you know, your vegan Jackie vegan pizza.
There it is.
There it is. Like that handle always gets onto me and I'm like, okay, let's check it out. And like, it's like, and you're like, I just yelled down with the patriarchy in class. And like, I'm always like, okay, what is that? So please explain to the audience what is down with the patriarchy. We are here with Jackie Dohna, and she is, we're here at Zeal Conference. I think this will be the last one, guys, out of the Zeal conference. So you may still hear the background music and the people yelling because it's lit right out here. But what is down with the patriarchy?
So first, last name is Dohna.
Dohna.
Okay. Yeah. Kind of like donut, but you just don't pronounce the T.
Okay, sounds good.
So, down with the patriarchy. Okay, so I think for me, I've always been a person that is very aware of what's going on around me. And so I've always been, okay, I don't want to say always. Recently, I've developed this passion for empowerment, specifically women's empowerment. And I've been able to identify, you know, the patriarchal society that we live in, how that affects me personally as a woman in the seminary, as a woman in a seminary of Adventism, but also how that affects my fellow sisters. But I think for me, I had an experience recently where it kind of ignited that for me. It was an interaction with a male. I won't go into details, but it was an interaction that I realized the many layers that the patriarchy is made up of. And so those layers, each layer has an impact on my life. And it just really caused me to self-reflect and to think about, okay, what about the patriarchy have I internalized? The way that I view other people, what about that is patriarchal? The way that I maneuver, the way that I think. And so I can be a little bit provocative with using that phrase, like down with the patriarchy. I don't use it all the time. I'm not going to, start off a talk down with the patriarchy.
It seems like it's all the time. Every time I open it, maybe it's the time span. Like I open it like at the beginning of the month, and then like the next time I open it is at the end of the month. But yes, I know what you're saying. You're not always using it.
Yeah. But I think that, down with the patriarchy is just something, I don't want to keep using that because I don't want it to be like my phrase. I mean, I want it to be my phrase, but I also don't want it to be my brand. But I think more importantly, I'm about women empowerment.
Okay.
And specifically women of color. And so for me, women empowerment starts first with doing self-reflection for myself and doing a lot of digging and healing of trauma, but then also providing that for my other women who have experienced similar things or different things. Judy talked yesterday about building bridges among us women. And so I think with women empowerment, that's the first step for me. And then I think after that is when, that in itself, I think is starting to burn down the patriarchy. Like that's a piece of it. But then I think then that's when we can begin to mobilize and move forward. And I don't want to burn down the patriarchy to then start a matriarchy. Like, that's not the point of that. It's to burn it down so that there is no longer this tower, this patriarchal tower, but now it's just, there's nothing that exists. The tower's gone, and we can coexist and, equality. That's what I'm here for.
So equality,
all power to all people.
Right. Equality is the goal.
Yes, absolutely.
So when it comes to equality, I really appreciate that you said, I'm not trying to set up a matriarchy.
Yeah.
Because you're saying like, I see that we're not equal, but at the same time, we can be. And once we get there, we don't have to build something up. Because I think a lot of people are afraid of that when they hear terms in, conversations about social justice, conversation about equity and diversity. And, they're like, are they trying to set up like the same system of oppression just on their side now? Like, like the us versus them kind of idea, and like reverse it to a them versus us, So when it comes to women empowerment, what's your biggest challenge right now?
So I'm going to be really honest right now. My biggest challenge is not going to the other extreme. So I view it as, let's say I was on this hill and I had these experiences that started to draw me to enlightenment. And when I say enlightenment, like realization, like I started to see things that I hadn't seen before within society. And I started to realize, oh snap, like women are really oppressed. Like we are really oppressed. Like of course I knew the society we live in, you can't not see certain things, but I started to really see things, especially being in the seminary and hearing certain like comments by men in the seminary, by professors. And I started to I went past the point of balance, the middle point where it's just like, okay, I'm here. I understand that there's systems of oppression and I want to fight against it. And I am angry and I'm going to use that anger to help fuel equality. I kind of ran past that and went in the other direction. And I started to become too militant. I think being militant is fine, but I started to lose that balance and lose that footing. And I can see why you said every time you went on social media, it was down to patriarchy. Because for me, it was like every day I woke up, I was angry. And I'm just like, this is not okay. The fact that I have to walk through life as a woman of color and experience these things. And I started to allow that anger to push me away from that balance. So for me, I think the hardest thing right now is remaining balanced. So I have to remind myself every day that the effects of the patriarchy, they don't have to consume me. It is something that I want to fight against, and I'm trying everything in my being to fight against, but it doesn't have to consume me. So I'll give a small example. Something that triggers me, and I fight against it every time. When a male holds open the door for me, I get slightly triggered because of that experience that I had with that male. It didn't involve a door, but because of that anger that I have, because of that experience, that trauma, little things trigger me. So if a male holds open the door, I'm triggered. Immediately I'm thinking, is he holding up the door for me because he thinks I'm lesser than him? Does he think that I can't hold the door open for myself? Or does he think that he has to open the door for me because he's a male? And so I'm instantly flooded with all of these thoughts. And I have to pause and I have to remind myself, no matter his intention, first of all, I can't figure out his intention. That's not my job to. I could never. I'm not Jesus. And secondly, no matter his intention, I still can walk through that door and be okay.
He's still doing the nice thing.
He's still doing something nice, no matter his intention.
Right.
And so it's just constantly reminding myself and constantly pushing back against the internal struggle.
Right. And it will be different if he was doing something detrimental.
Exactly.
Like,
yes.
Right. It will be like you're using your advantages against, society or against women, and things of that nature. Now, what would you say to individuals that may be thinking, but what's wrong with patriarchy? Or it's been working for a long time now. You look from the times of the Bible where a lot of people say that it was a patriarchal model. So what's wrong with it? Is it really wrong? Or, doesn't it produce good results? Expand on that, for people that may be thinking that way.
So it's been working for those who it benefits. So for males, it's been working. But I think, so for me, I think the most important thing is to consider the fact that just because it works for you doesn't mean that it works for everyone. And just because it may have historically worked, which I can argue that it hasn't, but let's say it did in history, like throughout all of history, the patriarchy was fine for everyone. That doesn't mean that there could come a time where it's not fine now, because things are changing. And I think that once we open up our mind to realize, we could be wrong about things, that's when we enter a space where we can begin dialoguing and sharing stories and hearing the hurts and the pains that the patriarchy has caused. And we can come to not necessarily the same conclusion, but we can just have a wider perspective of this issue.
Okay. We're here at Zeal, and you're one of the organizers. You're like the people's director.
People relations director.
There it is.
Yeah.
PR. There you go. That was close. But while setting up Zeal, was the team mindful of giving a space, an equitable space, to both genders?
Absolutely. So everything about Zeal and everything within Adventist Revolution as a whole, super intentional. Like, I've never been a part of something that's been more intentional than this. Like, sometimes it can be a little draining because it's so intentional. It's like so much interpersonal, talking, and so much interpersonal relating and, processing through. But as far as creating that space for both genders to be present and both genders to have, that space to express the things that they are passionate about, that was absolutely something that was intentional. I can't really speak fully to that because I wasn't the person who's a program director. But I do know that we had equal speakers on both sides. We had equal women, equal men in terms of numbers. And also, we tried to be super intentional about diversity within that, and not just within race. Every time we talk about diversity, we tend to talk about race, which is super important. Not saying that it isn't super important, but also within like age, within cultural background, where people come from geographically. Opinions. Yeah, there was a lot of intentionality placed behind that. And I think that's what made this event so successful, was because of that. Like, I came here and I got to interact with people that I probably never would have. And I got to interact with people that if I would have seen them on the street, I might have looked at them and thought something about them. But because I was in this space with them, I was able to dialogue and see, wow, even if we do have different opinions, like, we're able to sit here and dialogue.
You talk about women empowerment, dialogue, and creating a safe space. A lot of spaces are not safe in our current society, and sadly within our church. How can we change that? Especially women in the Adventist church don't have a space to be affirmed, especially after many conversations and votes that have been taking place. It's really hard to empower women within the Adventist church in the structure. A lot of people will say, you don't need a position to, get the job done. And that may be true. However, positions and power advance the work in a way that positionless, without money, budget, just a paid position can make a big difference. But how can we start creating those safe spaces for women and, kind of like create equality among ourselves?
Yeah, that's a loaded question.
And you're there to fix it.
Yeah. So I think, first, those of us who have come to the conclusion that it's needed, I think we have a huge responsibility to have conversations like this. Like, for you to invite me and interview me and ask that question in itself is important and is necessary. And so I think that those of us who are aware need to begin to come together and brainstorm ideas. Brainstorm ways that we can actually begin to implement this on a personal level, definitely, like, me and you. But then also, I think Adventist Revolution is something that could advance us to the point where women's ordination could actually become something that's accepted within Adventism. I'm not saying that it is. I'm not saying that it either way, I think that the fact that we're trying something. And Adventist Revolution isn't just about women's ordination, but the fact that this is a space where women empowerment is widely accepted, and we're going to make noise about it. We're going to talk about it, that this is something that we're trying to move forward. And I think even if we do decide to try things and things fail, not stopping there and not becoming discouraged just because, I tried to do this and it didn't work out. I think just continuously working towards whatever it is that we're feeling called to.
I see your point, and I think that, also allowing for the conversation to flow, but doing things also, sometimes we, sadly, in Christianity as a whole, we like to think the right things, but not do the right things, and I think we need to start doing more and creating more, in order to actually get to a place where we can truly show equality, something that I was thinking when you were talking about patriarchy and just bringing it down, and creating that equality will be that a lot of people seem to have a view within the Adventist church, within Christianity even. I mean, I can think of a lot of denominations, especially those around the Gospel Coalition, right? When you think about being egalitarian, right? There are a lot of the word against, or the antonym. Man, I don't know the regular word. What is the regular word for antonym? The opposite. There you go. Oh my goodness. I'm not trying to be snobby and smart. It's just that it was easier for me to remember that. But the opposite of egalitarian is complementarian. Mm-hmm. So, where complementarianism kind of teaches that, one needs the other. Egalitarian teaches that, they're both equal. How do you view masculinity and femininity then? Are we supposed to be identified first by our humanity or by our, kind of individual traits? Where do you see that balance in between, not saying hey, you're a human. Yes, you're a human first, right? But you also have specific traits that complement each other. It's not just I'm a full egalitarian or I'm a full complementarian, but how can we get to that intersection,
I'm so glad that you asked this question. So this is, I think, a pivotal part of pushing back against the patriarchy. And I say that because you talked about how there's masculinity and there's femininity. But a lot of those things within our society have been constructed by our society. So the things that are seen as masculine don't have to be masculine, but they have just been called masculine because society has created this patriarchal structure. So I'm going to try to give an example. So, okay, the phrase man up is typically said when a male is crying or expressing emotion, which I think is absolutely toxic. For you to try to quell a man's emotions in that moment is saying that your emotions are not masculine. And so I think that we need to push back against what society has told us about masculinity and femininity. I think there are differences within that. Me as a woman, I'm different than you as a man. But I think we need to start pushing back against that and start to think, okay, what about me telling a man to stop crying is wrong? And why, where did that come from? That came from a deep-rooted patriarchal mindset. That came from men having to always be strong because that's just what we're told. You got to be strong. You can't show emotions. You can't. That's seen as weak. And your emotions are seen as feminine, and femininity is weak, which is I will absolutely push against. There's nothing about femininity that's weak. And so I think that, yes, there is a sense of egalitarianism, but there's also that complementary of, as a woman, I am created in God's image, and you as a man also created in God's image, and we complement one another to create the full image of God. I think that's the most important thing about this battle that I'm fighting is I don't want people to just see women as equal. I want people to see that we create the full image of God. God created us in God's image. And I'm even starting to try to change the way that I view God, in the sense of I try not to call God male or female. I just call God God.
Okay.
Because I can find scriptural references where God is viewed, or not even, God is expressed in the masculine and God is also expressed in the feminine.
Right.
And so it's pushing back against that as well. It's like, no, we're both equal because we're both a part of who God is.
Right. I think that it goes back to certain ideas that have been perpetrated. I mean, like, just the language of the Old Testament and the language of the New Testament have a very different flavor. You know, like, you see a very paternal God in the Old Testament, and you also see maternal, you know, as the hen, you know, collects, or, you know, gathers. There you go. I'm remembering my Bible. As the hen gathers, you know, the chickens, right? I will gather you. Like, you know, we have that promise from God. And, you know, you have those maternal traits, like, you know, where God, you know, just wants to hold us close, like, you know, kind of representations of a mother, what a mother usually does to a child. Like, you know, we cannot deny that there's a different, I will say, special connection between a mother and a child. Like, I mean, when you birth a child is different than when you just are looking, you know. So as a male, I feel like if I ever have children, I will never have that same connection, but it doesn't mean that I can't connect, you know. And I like that you painted the full picture, you know, that males cannot fully represent the image of God by themselves, and females cannot fully represent the image of God as themselves. It has to be together.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a very, very important point. When you are met with resistance, what are the usual arguments that you hear, or, like, you know, the things that kind of bring you down, and how do you move past those? You know, because when you're trying to be out there and say, I don't want this model, right? I want to have more equity and equality. There's always some people pushing back. How do you find courage to keep moving forward when maybe structures have been set for you not to do that?
So I think sometimes a lot of the resistance that I face is from myself, if I'm being honest. It's a lot of my deep-rooted insecurities that tell me that, Jackie, you're doing too much. Like, you're doing a lot. Is it that serious? And a lot of those insecurities come from society. So that's things that I've picked up from, you know, society telling me certain things. But I think in those moments when I'm just really tired and I just want to give up, and I'm just like, okay, this is too much. I want to quit the seminary. Oh, I've considered that. Almost every day this semester, I've battled between staying in the seminary and leaving. And I think what keeps me going is knowing that at the end of the day, God has called me and God has a purpose for me. And I know that sounds really cliche, but it's really what keeps me going. And the fact that me doing what I'm doing, me continuously trying to push back against what I've been taught and what I've been told, and, you know, what society has conditioned me to believe, I'm realizing that other people can benefit from it. And at the end of the day, that's really all I'm here to do. That's literally what I'm called to do. I'm called to love people like Jesus, and I'm called to fight against injustice. So once I remind myself, or better yet, once the Holy Spirit reminds me of that, it doesn't make things easier. I'm still tired. I still hear insensitive comments. I still have days where I'm just like, again, Jackie, you're doing a lot. Chill out. It's not that serious. But I have to keep reminding myself and keep allowing the Holy Spirit to remind me, and keep encouraging myself. And I think one of the biggest things, and I really can't emphasize this enough, I wish I had an hour to talk about this right here. The fact that I have a community of women around me that I've never had up until this point. A community of strong women who, in those moments where I'm like, wow, I am super upset right now because this man in the seminary just said something wild, for somebody to sit there and listen to me, and then to also affirm me and to support me. And then I also have to shout out my male friends that are super aware and super intentional about also doing exactly what I'm doing. And I think that's important to have friends of both male and female who will support you in this and who will be open and honest with you. And I've had many conversations with a few of my male friends where they're honest and tell me some of their thoughts that are very patriarchal and very toxic. And we have to sit there and wrestle through it. And then vice versa. I've had some of them call me out and say, well, Jackie, I think that's coming from something else. That's not really coming from, that's coming from something that you're projecting, or that's coming from something that you're personally dealing with. And so I think there's that accountability that keeps me going and keeps me encouraged.
That's good to hear. I think everyone should have that kind of community.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I mean, it's not easy to have that kind of community just because time, space, location, different things. But, hopefully you have some sort of, or trying to at least, that I think that can start, the process. So, well, I'm glad to hear that, you're hoping for projects to flourish, if somebody wants to continue this dialogue with you about women empowerment, how to do it, and maybe like projects that you have in the future, how can they do that?
So first, like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, shameless plug. So you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, Jackie Vegan Pizza. I'll start putting out more videos. I haven't uploaded in like 2 years, but it's fine. They're coming. So yeah, I will be putting out information, videos through that space. Also, you can reach out to me, any social media platform. If you find me, please reach out. I'm always here to listen, always here to just pour into people and be poured into. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, for sure.
That's good to hear. And as a last kind of like, before I give you the final word, tell me a little bit more about Adventist Revolution and what that means to you.
Again, a loaded question. You got some loaded questions. So Adventist Revolution, what it means to me. It means more than I can put into words. It means, I think one of the biggest things that Adventist Revolution has done for me is the word freedom just comes to my mind. Freedom, liberation. It has helped me to walk in this like liberation that I've been feeling for a while. I've been feeling liberated in how I identify with God and how I identify as a woman, as a Black woman, how I identify as a Christian, how I identify as an Adventist. I've been, on this liberation journey. And I think Adventist Revolution has given me a space to continue that, like to continue being changed and progressing, and then also joining others. I can't explain how crazy amazing Zeal has been and this Adventist Revolution journey. Just meeting people from all over who have similar thinking processes and who are just super open. I think even beyond just having that similar thinking, it's just the openness. And so if I could sum up Adventist Revolution and what it's meant to me, it's just continuing to be liberated and continuing to connect with not only God, but also the people around me.
That's good to hear. As there's our tradition, final word goes to you. So whatever you want to say, I'm pretty sure I know what you're going to say, but we'll see.
Am I that predictable?
No. Well, I mean, I was hoping for you to say down with the patriarchy as a final word,
I was gonna, but I also didn't want to be predictable.
Okay.
Because you got to keep people on their toes.
That's right. Okay. So we're going to give you the final word now. Whatever you want to say, go ahead.
Now I feel pressure. All right. Down with the patriarchy.
You've been listening to Disruptive Adventism. We hope that today's topic helped you to think and change something about your practices, about your faith, about your Adventism. If you want to subscribe, make sure to go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcast. We'll be there. And make sure to give us a review if you like what you're listening to. If you want to support, make sure to go to patreon.com/disruptiveadventism. It helps us pay our bills and produce the content that you're listening to. And if you want to socialize, make sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram or on Twitter, and hit us up whenever you need anything. We'll be there to support you. Thank you for listening today. We hope you join us next time. And as always, we invite you to be disruptive.